to start with roll call for the town council. Kevin Burke.
Here.
Brian Moore.
Here.
Michael Johannes.
Here.
Tricia Ball, absent. And Jason Little, absent.
And from the Parks Board, we have John Goldsberry,
Here.
John Kincaid,
Here.
Eileen Farmer, Jennifer Rich.
Here.
Also present are Jesse Mullen, Zach Tischendorf, Clint Rose with CHA/Midwestern, and Nick Schwartz with CHA. Okay, I guess I'll interlude. So thank you everybody for being here this evening. Really excited about the information that we've got on tap. The Parks Board met about a month ago with Clint and with Nick just to kind of get oriented with the redesign that they have performed for us, as well as get some initial cost estimates, and also kind of start developing a plan of attack. And we wanted to bring you all into the fold. Obviously, you're a very critical piece of this. And just kind of want to familiarize you with what we've started with, as well as potential next steps forward. So with that, if you don't mind, go ahead and open to your CHA packets if you have them, and Nick can kind of take it from there. If the feed works. There we go.
Everybody see it okay?
We can see you. Are you going to share your screen again, or?
That would be great. Just let me know that you can see everything that's on screen right now. So I'm assuming that everybody can hear me, so I'm just going to kind of move forward. So, really appreciate the council and the board's evening this evening to kind of help us walk you through any questions you may have. So, as you know, we took a look at phase 1A of the Yellow Park Master Plan and really kind of drilled down into that a little more deeply in terms of, making sure that we got things as close as we could to right, putting it into CAD, getting it a really good definition so we've got pretty defined areas. We understand the utilities that are existing. We also understand kind of phasing it out into a logical sub-phase. The play priority number 1, event lawn was really priority number 2. Priority number 3 was the concessions in the restroom area. Then priority 4 were kind of the flanking pavilions. And, 5th was the on-street parking. So when we start to take a look at this, really we took a look first at the playground and said, okay, what makes the most sense in terms of what to include, what not to include, not only just with the play area itself, but what kind of connections can we make to come in, to come out, and keep it so that way we wouldn't be disturbing too much of the existing flow to the existing baseball and softball fields that are there, as well as keeping the basketball court pretty intact without really having to disturb or disrupt that too much. So we looked and said, okay, the best course of action would be to make sure we can begin to get that shape of the event lawn with the sidewalks, get the play area, and then also, begin to put that spine down the back to the pathway. So that way, we've got pretty clear access in and around and through the play area. The next thing we did was took a look at the event lawn and really kind of made sure that, the event lawn space really performed what we needed it to, which was, you know, a really healthy entrance here, the event lawn space, but also to go ahead and really finalize that sidewalk loop around the ellipse that's there. And once we started to take a look at that, then that kind of allowed us to look at the concession area, kind of a little bit independent, but also wanting a connection over to the basketball courts. You know, and this is more of a standalone. The reason that this is priority 3, one of the reasons is that it makes a lot of sense to have this as priority 3, because, you know, the utilities that you're gonna need to come to get to the concession, water, sewer, electric, those, you know, the existing electric service is right here. So it makes sense to kind of allow this area here for sewer, for water to come through here. And then really, you know, the flanking elements of the open air shelters, they really become, you know, what kind of really fills this space out. And then, you know, looking at the parking situation, you know, redistributing all of the nose-in parking, providing a median along Ashburn, and making sure that we can get some level of tree or landscape in there, both from a visual standpoint, but also begin to define where's the road and where's the parking lot in this phase of the development. Also, just trying to finalize the area right around the basketball court itself. At the last meeting with the rec board, you know, it had come up, hey, do we need all of these trees out here? Or, you know, we just kind of showed what was in the master plan. We could certainly kind of take a look at, you know, when we begin to look at the individual phases, what makes sense from a maintenance standpoint, also what makes sense from a cost standpoint, because, you know, we've all got to balance, you know, a good design with good financing and making sure that, you know, we can meet budgets where we need to. So with that said, you know, in that kind of thought process, we went ahead and developed an estimate for these. Estimates are done by our cost estimating group. That's a separate group we have in-house, and that's all they're dedicated to, is doing construction estimating and scheduling for all of our engineering projects, but also all of our CM at risk and all of our OPM owners project management projects that we have come up. So, you know, we kind of looked at these from, you know, priority 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, kind of moving across, and then moving down, we've got really the hard costs that we talk about. You know, we've got contingency, and then we also have direct general costs on the contractor side. Items such as, you know, general conditions, liability insurance, performance and payment, and then, you know, contractor fees or profit at this point in time. You know, and that gets you kind of an estimated, when you add all of these guys up, it gets you an estimated total. And then we always need to talk about escalation, right? Because these numbers are today's numbers, or, you know, what we anticipate to be the numbers when you're going to go ahead and get to a construction side of things. So right now, you know, we're anticipating, you know, that this may not go to construction right away. So there may be an upcharge in pricing and commodities for these items. So we've attached a 3.75 increase, and then that'll get you a total estimated cost. So right now, for, you know, phase 1A, the playground area, that would include the playground, sidewalks, the connections. All of that adds up to about a little, we'll just call it 1.6 million, for lack of a better term, for the playground area. When we start to take a look at the lawn, right, take a look at the lawn, any of the surrounding sidewalks that need to get constructed and a little bit of the landscape there. You know, that's a little over $285,000. You know, when we start to talk about concessions with the building, you're always gonna drive up costs a little bit more. But when we start to take a look at hard costs, based on a square foot basis, along with other items, we're right around 3.2 million. The pavilions themselves, those flanking pavilions, as well as the other improvements that we need to have there. Again, the pavilions were based on a square foot basis. Again, a lot of these things, when you get into design, you know, we can certainly look at what the program's gonna be and adjust cost as we need to meet program. It's closer to 782. And then when we start to talk about, you know, the last phase, which would be the street parking, that's a little over $1.59 million, plus or minus. So when we start to take a look at the grand total, you know, this entirety of the project, you know, when you start to add in all of them together, it's a little over $6,647,705. So, you know, one of the tasks that we were asked to look at early on is, hey, what can $1 million get us? What can $2 million get us? And I think we can see that, you know, 1 million will almost get you where you need to be with the playground. 2 million would certainly get you, you know, where you need to be for the playground and the event lawn. And then I would say, you know, choices after that are going to be based upon available funding that the town may have at its disposal. And, you know, I know this is kind of a short introduction, but I'd rather make sure that I can have time for you all to ask the questions that you need to ask. So with that said, does the council or the board have any questions now that you all have had, at least at the board level, some time to digest it a little bit? And, you know, for the council, I know this is your first time seeing it, so if there's anything that you need me to clarify, please feel free to let me know and clarify whatever you need me to clarify.
So while everybody's kind of looking through it, I would like to just talk a minute. So I know obviously these are very large numbers. Whenever we had asked Clint and CHA to do this redesign, it was basically to get a better idea of if we got everything that we were trying to get in this first phase, what would it cost us? And then also take into consideration any utilities that might need to be moved or added and those sorts of things, so that, say we want to start with just the playground, what other things do we need to be keeping in mind if we want to circle back later in the future and try to do a restroom and concession building, do an event lawn, these sorts of things. So this doesn't necessarily mean we're coming to you guys saying, hey, we want $7 million. We understand that there's constraints, and we'll talk a little bit more later about potential funding and things. But just kind of giving you guys an idea of where we're coming from on this, more than anything. So
another thing that we did discuss last meeting too is to help reduce cost, but also give the community some ownership, is having some volunteer days to do a lot of the work that we can do, simple work, before the contractors show up, to hopefully eliminate some of the cost, and get the community involved. But first and foremost, on top of that, I mean, we've done the surveys with Region 15, is it Region 15?
that was who helped do the original master plan, yeah.
So we did the original surveys, master plan, all of that, and the playground is super important. The current playground, I don't even know how many years old it is. Does anybody know?
There's original pieces from when it was built.
Yeah. Zach and his team has repaired multiple things multiple times. It's becoming a safety issue for kids, you know, over time. But then also, you know, all of us know if we've been down there for a baseball game for our kid or whatever, you know, you've got one kid playing and you've got 2 or 3 kids running around, so they really need a safe place to go. So I think it's really important, and in addition, everybody can use the playground in our community, not just the baseball players or the softball players, soccer players, whatever. You know, there's a lot of people that come down there and utilize the playground in the park. So I think it's super important that we, you know, if we're gonna do something, we need to get started with that playground at some point soon.
Yeah, on the playground front too, I don't know how many folks have been down to Boonville City Lake Park. We did that project last year as a build operate transfer project with the city. Very similar size playground. In fact, this one might be just a little bit smaller than what we had at Boonville, but very similar price-wise. Keep in mind, you will have the ability to pick out all the play features. You know, Nick's not really taking into account play features or anything like that. We just kind of giving you a pretty solid estimate on where we think it would be. But really, if you haven't been to Boonville, I do advise take a look at City Lake Park there. I think playground-wise, size-wise, it's going to be very similar to what we have proposed here to what is there. So just want to put that out.
Does anybody from the council have any questions or the board?
I think my priority would be, you know, trying to improve the playground area.
Yep.
And, you know, if we have something else that we can build on while we're down there doing that, you know, if we can tackle that. Be a dream come true if we could just say we're gonna do it all tonight and have it done by the end of the year.
Yeah.
We did gather some timelines with Nick the last time as well. So if you look at priorities 1 and 2 for the event line and the playground, you know, estimated timelines for the priority 1 and 2 would be about 8 months. For priority 3, you're looking at about 9 months to a year. For priority 4, you're looking at about 4 months. And priority 5, you're looking at about 4 months. So those are just ballpark timelines for you guys to note down. You know, we've talked a little bit too since our last meeting, and obviously the playground's the biggest priority, but you know, some of the other things we talked about, you know, the shelter house comes in handy, but it's definitely dilapidating a little bit over time and needs some attention or needs to be replaced. The event lawn, you know, that's a nice addition. However, we do have a lot of green space down there, so, you know, we could either expand on the playground in that area or move forward with the pavilions as well at some point, to make sure we've got some shelter down there as well, since that's a cheaper, priority on this list. But, I think that area though is definitely a focus that we need to move on as soon as we can.
Yep.
We need playground started within the next year or so if we can.
Yep.
Looks neat, what you guys sketched out and your efforts that you put into it, appreciate that. A lot of trees down there.
Yeah, one thing with the trees, we did talk with Nick and Clint last time, especially in the parking area. They kind of just plug those in as a visual, but one concern I have, and we have always had, are kids crossing the road down there. And my concern with the trees would be more restricted vision.
Being able to see them.
You know, you might see a kid shoot out from one of those trees or whatever and not be visible to the road or whatnot. So that, you know, those are more for the visual design, but they don't necessarily have to be there. Some of the trees south of the integrated play area there, you know, I don't know if we necessarily need all of them, but one of the factors for those trees to be there is for foul balls to protect that area. We did talk about that for safety of the kids over there. Doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen, so having some sort of structure there will help that out a little bit. We did talk that through with Nick and Clint as well.
Provide.
Well, it still does, depending on what time of year it is.
Still the same sun shooting down.
And one thing that Clint, I would like you to talk about bot at some point. One thing I do want to go over. So I did send you guys some estimates on the ANC TIF, and then I also today was going through some numbers for CEDIT, which is the County Economic Development Income Tax. But I'm going to take a step back for a second. So looking over these estimates and looking over my initial assessment of those revenues, if we were to use those revenues for these projects, obviously we can't get everything that's in our master plan done with that money, probably even over a 2-decade period. We can get a lot of it, and I think we can focus our priorities. So I think taking a step back and saying, okay, it's probably not going to be a finish everything in phase A and then go do phase B and then go do phase C. It's going to be up to us to put our heads together and figure out what is the most important things to the community. And in my mind, based on the survey data that I've looked over, it's number one's the playground. They've been wanting this for probably 3 or 4 surveys. You go back 15 or 20 years, people have wanted a new playground. So I think that's definitely the first thing. The second thing is more field space. We're beyond capacity, and a lot of times it affects the quality of the play, especially in the fall season with soccer, because we just don't have enough practice space. We don't have enough space to take pressure off of the main fields, and they get torn up very easily. And then I think the next priority is the courts, the new courts. People really want pickleball courts, volleyball court, more volleyball courts and more basketball courts, and it to be centralized so like the kids have more play space while their sports are going on. And then I think from there, it kind of allows us a little more flexibility. Do we want to look at a dog park if we have money left over? Do we want to look at paving more of the parking or possibly doing the restroom and concession building? I think we hit the high notes first, and I think we'll get a lot more community support, and they'll be very appreciative of an approach like that, rather than, okay, well, if we spend a bunch of money up front and then we don't have any more money, well, it could be another 10 years before we can do anything. So with that in mind, I mean, we're not going to pour over it all tonight, but I will pass these out for you guys to take home and look at. Nick, I apologize. I'll forward these on to you too.
That's okay, not a problem.
So on the first page, I have just a very basic map that I used paint to create. Just kind of highlighting those 5 priority areas and what the main focus would be. And then the secondary priorities list would be, okay, we've got these main things done. What do we tackle next possibly? So from a funding perspective, when we look at the year end for 2025, we have quite a few funds that we could use, but I think the only 2 that are really appropriate would be that TIF A and C allocation, which is on the back, and then right above it is the County Economic Development Income Tax. The biggest reason being that we are able to collect quite a bit of revenue every year, whereas these other funds, they're already kind of allocated, like the general fund. I don't think it would be a wise use to use the general fund because with the property tax changes, we don't know what that's going to look like from a revenue perspective and if we're going to have enough to maintain our operating for a few years, which we should, but you never know. And then the park and rec funds, we have the standard park and rec fund as well as the non-reverting fund, which is also called our special fund. Basically, the park and rec fund is our operating money for the year for the park, and we do try to do minor repairs with that fund. So, like for instance, our ball fields are probably going to start needing new lights. With a little bit of building and equipment money that we have in that park fund, as well as our donation fund, we're hoping that we can use that and just kind of do maybe a field a year or every other year so that we can keep some of this bigger pool of money reserved for these types of projects. Rainy day, obviously, I don't think that's probably a wise use for this project. The park donation, again, we can use that money for smaller projects, and then the same with the grant fund. Now, if we're fortunate enough that maybe in a couple years, if some things change, the DNR might bring that LWCF grant back. Every once in a while, the Lilly Foundation has large sums of money that are available. And I think we'll be a little more competitive in those because we have an actual plan in place. So I feel pretty good about the potential of grants to help us with this. And then the same with the cum cap improvement or the CIG tax. It doesn't really generate a whole lot of revenue, so I think that's probably best reserved for other purposes. And then the cum cap development, it does generate quite a bit of revenue, but I think we probably need to keep that money set aside for maintaining the trail surfaces. There's going to be some resurfacing and some sealing that's going to need to be done on the original trails, and I don't think we want to burn our powder up there. So with that in mind, I went through Gateway, and that's basically the state software it's all open to the public, and you can figure out how much revenue is being collected, how it's being spent, and those sorts of things. So at the year end in 2025, in the ANC TIF district, we had about 1.25 million, and then the CDIT, we had about 1.2 million. So that gives us a starting point of just shy of $2.5 million. So we do have some money to start this stuff with. And then basically the TIF district should last through 2038, and we're currently paying a bond on it, but that should be paid off in 2032. So we would have almost 6 years of revenue with no bond payment. And then CDIT, we would also continue collecting revenue there. And basically, with the year-end balance in 25, if you took it all the way out through 2040, we would have just a little bit over $9 million available. I think we can, again, choose our priorities and judiciously put money towards those priorities as time allows and money allows. I don't think anybody necessarily wants to go through the process of trying to do a bond and having to pay bond counsel and those sorts of things whenever we can use what money is coming in to bite off these projects one at a time. So,
do we have somebody that is consistently looking at money that's available from Lilly or the other matching funds? I mean, is there somebody that's staying on top of that all the time?
yes, so, well, now that I kind of have a better picture of what's going on, yes, we, like the Lilly Fund, we would have plenty of matching funds in that instance to do something. We would have had with the DNR grant. Unfortunately, they've had to retain some of that money to put towards the state parks because of budget changes, and they haven't offered their grant program this year, and we don't know when it's going to return. But we are always looking for other grant opportunities, even small ones. You know, there's opportunities through, like, I think the American, Jesse, do you remember the name of that? It's like American, not skin cancer, the Dermatological Association. They offer grants on sunshades and stuff, so you can get much cost share money to be able to put up sunshades in the park. There's little grants like that can help bite off some of these smaller things, but then we kind of got to hope maybe that like Lilly or that DNR grant comes back and we could really get a big project done with some match money. So yeah, we're constantly looking.
And so you're working with Region 15 on
Yeah.
wearable and stuff, right?
Yes, yeah. Well, and then like Rachel Goldsberry and Emily Alvey with Community Foundation, they're on top of this stuff too. So we work with them hand in hand, and yeah, they keep us aware of what's going on. So,
Okay.
yep. So, did I go too fast? Is that okay? It makes sense to me because I sit here with it swimming around in my head all day, but okay. So now that I've tripped around through that, Nick, do you have anything else? I guess one question I have for you guys. So say in this first phase that we decide that we just want to do the playground. And then down the road, a restroom and concession would be like, we've got through all of our other projects that we want to focus on and we can circle back. Is that very easy to deal with from an engineering standpoint? Oh,
Nick, you might be muted.
I certainly am muted, and I'm always the guy that does that. So, what I was saying was, yeah, it makes sense. We can make it make sense, right? As long as it wouldn't, looking at it holistically, I think that would be okay and it would make sense. It begins to look at preserving the existing parking you have for as long as you can maintain that without kind of interrupting things. I would say the only thing that we would probably want to consider is really how many times, and I think we had this discussion at the board meeting too, was how many times you're coming in and out of that area, and how often are we going to be disrupting the seasonal aspect of play, because we've got to look at this in terms of, okay, when can we build this is really a lot of the time when you're going to see a lot of use of the baseball fields and some of the other amenities. So I think we'll need to be thoughtful about how we do this and how we structure it. But certainly if you wanted to do the playground first, that makes sense. And then, if for example, you wanted to come through and do, concessions next, makes a lot of sense from a revenue generating standpoint, from a bathroom standpoint. But, looking at it past that, I think we could certainly phase this based on the amount of funding that you've got available, and also be thoughtful about how we can minimize impact to the sports that need to go on at the same time we may actually be constructing here.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Nick said, I think the important thing if you do choose the playground is looking at grades of what the entire master plan area would look like to make sure we don't make a decision on the playground and that affects, the concession stand or the pavilions or the great lawn or the on-street parking. So looking at grading holistically and then also looking at utilities holistically. If you did that, I would probably want to try to get a lot of utilities for future phases done as part of that initial playground project.
It is doable.
Very much, yeah.
There's one thing that I thought about, as I went through these main priorities that are in all these different phases, was, okay, an event lawn is a great thing if you have a need for it. And I'm not saying we don't, but I think the use of the park from a sports standpoint is very much spring fall. And if we were to try to do an event, say in June or July, we have plenty of soccer field space and plenty of parking that can be repurposed, as opposed to making a dedicated investment in a space if this is the only thing you're gonna use it for, as well as the investment in the open air shelters. And so with that in mind, my thought was, well, what if we put the playground in the existing footprint and then maybe used a little bit more of the grass around it for other things, whether that's sunshades, whether that's a gaga ball pit, and then potentially in the future, maybe we could put that restroom and concession where the parking lot exists currently. Just to try to, again, focus the priorities, use the money that we have to get those things done, and then circle back to maybe the second tier of priorities later.
Yeah, I think it's a good thought. That could definitely be done.
What would happen, if we would not have any sports down there one summer, just to speed it up? So you can get everybody in and get the work done and,
The soccer is what makes it difficult. Typically, they're done with the spring season the first week of June, and then typically they will start up about the second week of August, which isn't a ton of time. The only problem with it is that we basically provide the space for all of North Spencer's soccer. Baseball and softball, you could probably figure out a way to flex it. It would be tough to get enough space at Dale, Mariah Hill, Christie, some of the other parks, but they can figure it out if they had to, but the soccer is really tough because there's nowhere else for them to go at the moment.
For this area though, how much would it affect soccer?
I mean, realistically, other than having a space for the younger siblings to play, I don't think it's gonna affect the sports a whole lot, really. People will still be able to access the park from different places and have plenty of sidewalks, and we would obviously have everything fenced off to try to keep people out of that area as the work's going on.
One thing to bring the council up to speed that we did discuss last time, because I posed the same question. What if we did it all at once? And the estimated timeline would be 1.5 years. Because I thought the same thing, you know, it'd be better to get it all done at once so that we're not constantly under construction the next 5 to 10 years, you know, or however long it takes. Plus, it makes everything cheaper, because the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets, the more mobilization, demobilization costs more. Once the equipment's there, the crews are there, you're gonna save a lot of money. And I don't know those exact savings, but it's definitely gonna be cheaper that way. Obviously, it's a big price tag up front. So pros and cons to that, but, I mean, in the, you know, best case scenario, that would be great if we could do it all at once. I don't know if it's doable.
So John, I'm sorry.
No,
When
go
you're
ahead.
done,
Yep.
So kind of feedback on your all at once, you know, one of the things we talked about at the last park board meeting was procurement methods, right? So I heard a lot of things, and I kind of sat back, let Nick talk, listened to the park board last time. What we're doing at our Boonville project, you heard me talk a little bit about it, we're spending about $25 million on our parks at Boonville. We did City Lake Park last year. That project, we started in the January timeframe, and we opened up, it was right around July 4th, we opened up City Lake Park. So we did a $3.5 million project in about 6 months. And that was a build, operate, transfer procurement method, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we started construction on our new aquatic facilities, the Olympic-sized pool, pool house, splash pad, all that stuff. We started on that back in September, and we are looking at, I won't officially say opening, but probably sometime in June, we'll be opening that project up. So build, operate, transfer, that project, if we did traditional design, bid, build, which majority of our projects are, probably would take 1.5 to 2 years. But with the build, operate, transfer procurement method, that allows kind of accelerate schedules. So, and there's also a finance component to that if you need it as well. So let me talk a little bit about build, operate, transfer if you're ready, Zach. Okay.
I'm ready.
So a couple other things that I heard, I think John mentioned, was potentially using local residents and others to help do some of the demolition work. The build, operate, transfer would allow us to do that. So what we would do in a typical build, operate, transfer is, if you wanted to see Jake move forward with design of, let's say, the overall improvements that you have in front of you today, we could move forward with design. Typically what I've done in that period is we would get to like a 30% design component of everything, and then we would go ahead and work with the town on build, operate, transfer. I know Jane heard a little bit of this at the Clerk Treasurer Conference last year. So if, so build, operate, transfer, the beauty of it is, if the town wanted to pursue that, it's an alternative procurement. Think design build, but it's a little bit different than design build. You would have to adopt IC 5-23, Indiana Code 5-23. You would adopt that, pass that resolution, and if you did that, we would then issue an RFPQ. So basically, you'd have 30% design plan sitting here, and then ultimately, we would want to kind of establish a maximum price that you would want to spend on the project. So say, hypothetically, scratching some numbers here, if you did priority 1, priority 2, priority 4, so that would be the playground, event lawn, pavilions, about $2.5 million. So let's say you focused on those, maybe you did or you didn't do the concession area. Hypothetically, let's say you pick $2.5 million is what you want to do. You would establish that, we would issue an RFPQ saying, hey, we want to spend $2.5 million on these elements. Here are the attached 30% plans that we have so far, and then you would publish that. Typically give about a month, kind of very similar to what we would do from a bidding standpoint on, you know, any kind of project that we've done with you. And then you basically would get what's called offers. So it's basically a finance-driven procurement method. So typically the offer is a financer of the project. They'll then have contractors underneath them as part of their team. But basically say, yes, we can build this for $2.5 million, what we see on the 30% plans. let's say you get a handful of offers, you would then select based on qualifications who you want to enter into what's called a scoping period. So you would have a committee that would evaluate all the responses that you get, and ultimately you would choose an offer to sit down and go through the scoping period. So not price-based, other than the fact that you're saying, hey, I've got $2.5 million in this example that I want to spend on this project. We would then get into the scoping period with whoever you would select as your offer, and then they would be a part of design plans. They progress from 30% to final. And again, they would be part of that team and helping to say, hey, we're going to get this done for you within that budget that you have. So ultimately, if you're happy, once you get through the scoping period, plans would be developed. You would then execute a contract with that offer to do the project for that guaranteed price, basically. But the beauty of BOT is typically the financer who is the offer who responds on BOT. They're going to pick typically local contractors, so it kind of helps from a contractors that you know standpoint, and also they'll work with Zach and the group and the park board on, hey, if you wanted to do some demo with your own labor, that lets us easily kind of incorporate that. Usually contractors don't play nice when you don't have that procurement method, so you say, hey, we're going to do some demo ourselves. It just gets messy. But in a build, operate, transfer, it's everyone's part of the team. So that, I think, it's been very successful. Like I said, we're doing it at Boonville, about $25 million of park projects through the BOT, and it's really let us accelerate schedules. It's let us kind of address things on the fly in construction that would be, change order processes that we typically have to bring to like the council. You typically don't have to do that because you're making decisions, but ultimately that $2.5 million, in my example, price is there no matter what. So you're still making decisions as the project progresses, but it lets you make decisions a lot faster. So to your point, John, I really think if there's a possibility in doing everything, I think it will be a more well thought out project if you could do everything at once. And I think we could accelerate that schedule from the 1.5 years that, I kind of mentioned last park board meeting, but we would have to have really all our ducks in a row to make that happen. What we did in order to make those construction schedules more aggressive, we spent, so kind of give you a perspective on timeline, we started the Boonville projects back in, would have been fall of 24 design-wise. We reached 30% plans at kind of the end of 24, early 25, then we selected our BOT offer. And so then we finished up design plans kind of in that springtime period. So that just helped kind of accelerate that schedule to where once everything's done, the construction team's familiar with everything, they've been a part of the design process, it just accelerated everything from there.
One question I have, going back to what Zach said about the event lawn space, looking at the plans here, and I know it's high level, it's kind of a loaded question, but what if we wanted to utilize that the event lawn space to almost double the size of the playground? How much would that increase the playground cost? Is that doubling the playground cost, or is it, 30% more ballpark,
Yeah.
What would that look like?
So again, and Nick can jump in too, my thought would be, really my experience, Nick's got more experience in parks and playgrounds than I do, but your features that you select are really a big cost component. There's a ton of different manufacturers out there, so that's gonna attribute a lot of it. But I think hypothetically, you could probably simply double it, depending on if you wanted to double the space. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, really the largest cost is equipment and surfacing. Again, if you're looking to spread equipment out, or if you're looking to create a larger type of amenity, then you'd definitely be doubling your cost if you were doubling the space. If you were just stretching out the amenities a little more, then you probably wouldn't be doubling the cost. You could probably save 50% of the cost, because really you're just stretching area, and it's the infill space that would either be grass. The other thing you just have to be cognizant of is when you start to stretch these pieces apart, you have to be thoughtful about the way you do that, because there is a very thoughtful play arrangement that gets taken care of when you want to be done with one piece of equipment and you're going to move to the next. So there is also the maintenance of the in-between spots, making sure that those are easy to transition for people that have maybe mobility issues or sensory issues.
Yeah, and that's one thing we didn't mention. Obviously, all of this is gonna be, you know, ADA compliant and, what's the term I'm looking for? Inclusive, so that we are up to par as far as all those guidelines go.
One thing too that I want to touch base on, the Leopard Transfers Act, you kind of alluded to this, about not wanting to take out a bond to do the project. So that is also a possibility with the Leopard transfer, is sometimes on these projects, the financer or the offer, I'll use those terms interchangeably, they can finance the project for a longer period of time as well, hence the build, operate, transfer component. The Boonville project, we actually took out bonds, so we financed that project with bonds. But I have done bots as well, where the financer offer will actually be kind of the bank for you on the project for a period of time as well. So that way you wouldn't necessarily have to take out a bond potentially. So those are all things that we would want to engage your attorney and Jane and everyone to understand that a little bit more. But there is sometimes a finance component as part of the project as well.
Clint, are those bonds general obligation bonds by the town?
Yeah, that's typically what I'm used to seeing on park type projects.
Okay. You know, just a little aside, that the town has never issued general obligation bonds ever in the history of the town. Just, I'm not saying they won't do it, but they wouldn't do it, but they're always been that's always been something that's not been considered anytime we're doing projects.
Is there a reason behind that? Have they had the opportunity to do it and turned it down, or like, what's the backstory there as
Well,
far
the
as?
back thing is that we wanted to live within our means.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been on the board, Kevin, had 25 years. And there was always kind of the attitude that if we can't pay for it, we're not gonna do it.
Okay.
We can't pay for it out of operating funds, we're not gonna do it.
Right.
I'm not saying that would continue to happen, I'm just saying that history is
Yeah,
there.
That's good to know.
Yeah, going back to the Louisville example, I'm not by any means telling you, I'm just, you know, every project, that entire project was funded with GEO bonds.
And when we started doing the trail projects, we had to agree that we would not use general obligation bonds to build the trails. So there is some history there.
Any thoughts
So-
from the council, or?
What do you guys think? Do you have any other concerns, or?
You know, like I said, you know, I would love to see the project
Sure.
be done. You know, just shut down the park and have it done within 2 years, but it's a money constraint, you know, where we can get the money. You know, your donations, or, you know, you got, you know, take out a bond, or, you know, something that we can consider. But, you know, like Mike said, we need to live within our means. We got a lot of things going on with, you know, how much revenue we're gonna be receiving with the state changing things on us and like that, but, you know, my main priority right now is to get that playground up and get that area. And if we gotta sort of visualize what we're gonna do in the future, you know, we can put in some of our main improvements in the ground, so we'd be ready to move instead of have to go back and dig up the, you know, the sidewalks or the playground or whatever.
And that's part of this too, you know, talking about the DNR funds, the Lilly funds, a lot of them require ADA compliant grounds to even get the funding, so that's part of our focus with all of this too, is to start heading that direction and get the foundation set, so that when we go to ask for this money, it's available because we're meeting those guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so we've gotta start somewhere with that. You know, we all know this thing was built from scratch on flood ground with donations and volunteers from the beginning, so it is what it is, but we're here now, and that's what we're required to have to get some of this funding, so.
I think we've done well with the
Yeah,
park.
very, very good, yeah.
Since it's been put down there.
Yeah, we've made,
But, you know,
Zach-
we're all wanting to improve it and have something really nice to talk about.
yeah, I mean, within the past 5 years, with the council's help and Zach and his crew, we've made tremendous strides there and at the community center, so I think, you know, this is the next big thing that's gonna get the community excited and generate more support down the road for the other projects that we'd like to see, so.
Yeah, I'm like Kevin, I think that, you know, we need to make the park expand, and there's definitely a need as the town grows. But there are going to be some financial restraints that have to be followed so that we have money to do other things. And, I mean, this is kind of in Zach's area too, but just in the last probably 3 weeks, I've had 2 different people come up to me and say, are we ever gonna build a new community center? So, you know, you got this, and then you have some people that want a new community center. Those things we just have to balance. I mean, this is great. The planning and the processing and all this is fantastic. It's just gonna be hard for the council to come up with
Yeah.
all the money that everybody wants, so. But
The one thing I will say, because Zach and I have had this conversation too, when you look at the numbers of utilization, the park is used a lot more than the community center. So I would love to see a brand new $5-10 million community center with a lot more amenities, some office space, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the numbers, I mean, everybody in Spencer County uses Yellow Park every year. So it's just one of those things where I feel like that's where we need to focus first, because as soon as that sun started shining, I mean, this weekend, the place was packed and there was nothing going on. They flock to it. Everybody that walks the trails, they end up down there. So I think, you know, I think it's important, if we were gonna, I don't fully understand the TIF and the seated. I know we talked about it a little bit, but like if we were gonna pull the trigger today, yay or nay, how much money do we have to move forward? Like, is this something, is that what we have now?
No,
Or,
so the 2.5, just shy of 2.5 million, $2,447,449. Excuse me, $2,447,449.20 is what we end 2025 with.
Okay.
In those 2 accounts.
okay,
But that would be wiping those funds out.
If we spend every dollar, but I
Yeah.
think even with this play, let's say we just did the playground. Let's say it cost us $1.5 million. We would still have 900,000, and then we would still be collecting revenue in 26. We would have the TIF bond payment, which is about 180,000. And I think we should collect we collected 370,000 in ANCTIF last year. So we still have a surplus in there. And then the seeded, we're really not spending a whole lot right now. I think in the past, you guys have used that to help with the trail, I believe.
Right.
what else does that funding get used for, or do we have plans to use it for other items, or?
I mean, that's really up to the council. I mean, like I said, traditionally, I think seeded has been used pretty heavily to help with the trails. And I think there's been some instances where the ANC TIF has been able to reimburse the general fund for some of those trail expenditures. The ANC TIF probably has a little more restrictions just because you can only use it inside of that TIF boundary that they've set.
Right.
But it is pretty extensive. It does cover quite a bit of ground around town. So, those to me were just the 2 that kind of stuck out, just because of the amount of revenue that they were able to collect and the fact that we're not spending a whole lot of it currently. Like I said earlier, Cume development, I think would probably be good to keep our powder dry there for resurfacing these trails, or if we want to add sidewalks or anything around town. That's just kind of where my mind goes.
Yeah, I just think, you know, we sit in here and you're talking about how much money's there, but we have to be realistic about how much money we can actually spend out of that and still have reserves, because that's what most of those funds are, the reserve things, so.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying, I think it's more of a piecemeal approach. You know, playground is a big priority, we have the money and we won't burn everything up. Maybe we start there, and then that gives it time to maybe collect a little more revenue, and then maybe it's field improvements next, and then maybe 3 or 4 years later, it's courts. That way we don't have to deal with a bond, and we're living within our means type thing. And then, obviously, any other priorities that you guys would have as a council, that would come out of those funds. So, it's just a thought that I had. I mean, ultimately, it's y'all's decision, but.
One other comment I meant to mention earlier, and I failed to. The priority 5, the street parking, I think, you know, if you guys wanted to, you could look at potentially doing community crossings. You know, it's a safety issue on Ashburn. So I think that could be a community crossings project. So we could potentially get $1 million grant through RIDDOT, I think, to improve Ashburn there. So that could be another option for you as well.
Yeah, and we've done well with community crossing grants, so.
Only one call a year, of course, now moving forward, so that call will be this summer. But you could potentially loop that into a plan as well and get some NDOT funds there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it fits the
Yeah.
criteria for that, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would take a big chunk.
Yep. The important thing is with community crossings that I've seen here in the last year, they're really looking at shovel-ready type projects. So if we would apply for that funding, we would want to make sure we have that design ready to go, because we have a period of 3 months from when we get awarded to have a bid in hand. So we could not do a bot for the street project portion. That would not qualify under a bot to get that NDOT funding, so.
Yeah,
But you could piggyback it with a bot if you wanted to do a bot for the other stuff. The street just couldn't be included in that.
so is there enough plans done already for that road and the?
No, so
Nope.
you would, yeah, Nick and I would be happy to assist if you guys make that decision to move forward with it, but I just wanted to bring that option up. So yeah, that would kind of be the next step, once you guys decide what you want to do, and we could go ahead and get a proposal to you for design and engineering and get things moving.
When's the deadline?
So community crossing will open up this summer, so I believe it'll be either June or July, I can't remember off the top of my head. They've been a revolving door on changes, but yeah, that'll be this summer when that call would open. And then once we would get awarded, typically it's about, they were quicker on the last go around, Jane probably knows this too. I think when we applied, they awarded it within a couple of months, I think it was 2 months. So you've got the time period when you turn in the application, then you've got a approximately 2 month window when they award. And then once they award you, there's a 3 month period to have your bid in hand and award the contract. So there's a little bit of room there. That'd be plenty of time to design it, I think.
I mean, to me, that sounds like a direction we certainly should consider to.
Yeah, I think it's something that we should plan on regardless of everything else, because the opportunity's there.
Yeah.
And to me, that parking area is a huge safety hazard. When that place is parked, or when that park is full, it's crazy how many cars are out there and somewhat sticking out into the road, and, you know, any full-size pickup with a hitch on it, it's hanging out. And then you got kids shooting in and out the vehicles, people unloading. It amazes me that we haven't had an accident down there.
Or even worse.
Yeah.
Is there enough space out there to widen that road?
I think so. That'll be a Nick question. Nick, do you understand the question?
Yeah, I do, and basically what happens is things kind of get flip-flopped with this arrangement. I don't know if you're actually gonna widen the road that much, but clearly you're gonna provide protection. Because right now you've got the parking and then the row of trees that's along here. This kind of flip-flops that situation where you're gonna take out that row of trees that's along there, you're gonna bring the parking inboard, and then have a 5 or 8 foot, median area, protective median from the roadway. So I don't think you certainly have the ability to widen the road a little bit, with the area you've got in your right of way right now. But at least specifically for the parking, you just kind of flip-flop some of the area that you have that you're using right now.
Okay, so what's the,
Does that make sense to people?
what's the traffic plan on this? Are those is that the, where those trees are, everything, I'm sitting here looking at this, to my right are both lanes of the road on the right side of those trees?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's what,
Yeah, those trees are the
Yeah.
new median separating the parking, so the parking would move
yeah,
into the park.
okay, that's
Yeah.
what
Correct.
I, okay.
Yeah, so this is kind of your existing conditions that you have out there right now, right? Where you've got your 2 travel lanes here, and then you've got your nose-in parking along here. Well, in this case, what happens is that, you know, this edge of where the gravel parking is, that really becomes the edge of the median. And then you've got your 2 trees here, and then, you know, you've got some sidewalk here. You start to reallocate this where this neck of green space that comes along here, that kind of goes out to the road, and then you've got your parking that comes inboard. So you really don't lose a lot of space, it's just a reallocation of space that you already have.
Now, the important thing is if we would look at potentially doing the street project, I think it would be critical almost to designing, you heard me mention earlier, really the focus is we don't want to do something phased if we go a phased route that's going to affect. So like if we look at the street first, I think we'd almost want to kind of design the entire area grade-wise just to make sure we don't have any conflicts. What I would probably see is basically we would want to design grading-wise that whole area. Really the only thing you'd probably hold off on would be design of the concession building itself and the pavilions in that scenario. Because we want to lock down grades at a minimum and utilities at a minimum if we're looking at doing the street project up front as well.
Sorry to kind of backtrack a little bit, Clint. So as it pertains to the community crossing, say we would apply for that, would we have to have funds already appropriated?
Yes, so there's a financial commitment letter when that application is made to NDOT. So Jane can probably weigh in on that, but yes, there would be a financial commitment letter when you go into that application saying, hey, we're funding 25% of what this project cost estimate is.
What's the split?
I believe it's still 75-25. They've made so many changes to it, don't quote me on that tonight, but historically it's been 75-25. So you potentially get 75% grant, 25% your local funds.
So that money though, that obviously would be appropriated, but then we wouldn't necessarily have to expend it until fiscal year 27 or whenever construction begins.
So yeah, you would have to have a contract awarded within 3 months of the NDOT award. It might not fall within, so again, it's a new schedule this year, so that call for applications is gonna be June, July time period. Give it 2 months for when they're gonna award that, so we'd be looking September-ish timeframe, and then we would have to have a contractor selected 3 months after that. So not necessarily gonna be this fiscal year. It would, a lot of the construction paths would probably come in over the winter into the spring of the following year, so spring 27. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a weird cycle with this change in schedule because, you know, you're gonna get awarded late summer. So that means you're really not gonna be paving this fiscal year or doing anything this fiscal year. It's gonna kick into next spring. It's kind of an interesting change in NDOT's philosophy.
So in these plans right now, was there anything in those plans for the road? Or is any of that money that you guys are talking about, is it this plan? Goes to the,
Yeah, it's priority 5.
Yeah, priority 5.
Priority five, yeah.
Priority
yeah,
five.
all right, okay.
Yep. And I think one thing we would want to do if we do go that route is talk to NDOT because, you know, we are making improvements to the road. You know, I would imagine we'd want to mill and resurface Ashburn as well as part of what we would do here. So I think we could make an argument. I would probably want to sit down if you guys do decide to go that route and say, hey, NDOT, of course you're going to help pay for the parking and the curb here. It's a safety issue. The selling point to me would be it's a safety issue.
You're right.
If we don't do this, you know, potential accident. So I think that would be our selling point to that, but I would probably want to sit down with them and kind of pitch that idea.
Yeah. So you guys might have, you know, be able to come up with money for the playground in that section of this and get the community crossing grant and get the road done.
At the same time.
I mean, that,
within the next year or two.
yeah.
One other thing I want to add too, and Zach, you're going to know better than I, or maybe Jesse, I don't know if she's coming back or not, but sponsorship money. When we started 4 or 5 years ago, however long it's been, what were we generating in sponsorships?
So prior to my start, it was about $4,000 to $5,000 a year.
And where are we at now?
So this year, we've noticed a little bit of a downtick. I think we're still gonna be about 8,000. Obviously, the last couple of years have been kind of convoluted a little bit because we've got scoreboard sponsorships, which are $7,000 a piece. But I would say on average, we've been probably in that 15 to 20 range.
Okay.
So substantial increase.
I knew we had increased, but I feel like we're heading in the right direction with that support, and I think getting anything started down there is gonna amp that up even more because people can physically see the change. And that's kind of where I'm at, like, yes, we need it for safety, yes, we need it to have some new facility upgrades and new utilities and whatnot, but we also need it for generating momentum. Because I think the more people see, the more they can utilize the space, they're gonna get more excited about putting their name out there, putting their money out there, and funding as well. So I think that's gonna increase too as we get something going.
And as you're talking about sponsorships, we do have an individual in our firm. His name is Tom Deal. He is a great resource for maintenance obligations from a cost perspective and also sponsorships. So as we kind of move forward, we can just kind of integrate him into this project if that's something that you would want a little bit of assistance on in terms of developing maybe a larger sponsorship program to help offset some of the costs of, maintenance or offset some of the costs on a larger scale.
So, as far as next steps, I mean, obviously, we probably need to come to some sort of a consensus on what the priorities are and how we're going to approach them in this phase. And then that would probably, from there, design work of some sort, and determining if we want to proceed with the lot, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I really think after hearing kind of the back and forth, looking at all the options, I would definitely be happy to meet again on the bot, because that is I know it's something the town historically has not done, but I do think that would be a perfect procurement method for this project, especially with all the different moving pieces to it. Sitting here looking at numbers, I mean, I really think if you take out the concession stand and the pavilions, you're not far from where you want to be, I don't think. So, if you look at a design that basically sets all the grades, get all the utilities relocated where they need to be long-term, get the street addressed, really that leaves you with the shelter and the concession stand, which are big ticket items. There's also, Nick will probably say this as well, that concession stand number, that pavilion number, there's a high-end range and a low-end range to those facilities. So I think potentially if you look at designing the whole thing, getting the playground, whether you expand the playground or you do the event lawn, we do the street, I think a bot makes a lot of sense. And I think what you might find too, if we do the bot, we do all that design, you might not be as far off as you think too from a concession or a pavilion standpoint. So.
Yeah, and you're right, Clint. We could certainly, the numbers that we have here are kind of middle of the road to a little bit higher in terms of cost, just to be a little protective of where we are at this point in time. As we narrow in on really what the pavilion structures are like, even the concession, from a better programming side of things, that becomes a little more, it puts the costs in more light and allows you to make some better financial decisions based on monies that are available, and also finish schedules and durability over the long term.
You know, that's one thing as engineers and landscape architects, we always strive, when you see a cost estimate from us, to Nick's point, we try to be in that middle, that average. So we never want to be on the low side, high side. I would say it's been a roller coaster since COVID, but the estimates you always see on here, that's kind of that average to Nick's point. We get that all the time. You'll hear someone say, well, I can get that done for $1.5 million instead of $3 million. There's a lot of things that go into that. So yeah, our numbers are kind of that sweet spot, which would be kind of in the middle.
So, and anybody chime in if they disagree with me. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like playground is priority one. And then probably the parking would be next. But then while we're doing that, we also have to think about at least the utilities portion for the restroom and the concession. With the caveat that it's probably gonna go where the existing parking area is above the playground. Is kind of what I'm hearing. I don't know if anybody else thinks otherwise, but does that seem reasonable?
And I almost feel like, I know we gotta find the money, talk about the money. I almost feel like when we do this playground, maybe bumping into the event lawn area a little bit, how can we squeeze in the pavilions too? Because they kind of all bring it together, you know what I mean? To have that covered space as well, because we're gonna get rid of the other shelter at that point. So it would be nice to merge that in. And again, we're gonna save a little bit of that money if we do it all at once anyways, so. I'm almost kind of seeing the playground event lawn pavilions as one project if we find the way to merge it and it makes sense financially, but, the concession's obviously a big ticket item and the parking is another big ticket item that we might be able to find additional funding for, so. I don't know, I'm just speaking and thinking out loud.
Yeah.
If anybody has any other
As far as
comments or
parking,
concerns.
if we can chime in on the NDOT, grant, community crossing, that's, we're only putting 25%
Right.
into it, so, that's almost, you gotta do that if the state has that available.
Yeah, if we can get free money, we gotta go after it.
Turns a 1.3 million project into a $300-something project.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the town has had tremendous success
Yeah,
with community crossing grant money, so there's a good chance that we,
To me, you're gonna be doing maybe two projects, maybe at the same time,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
playground and that road.
right. Yeah,
I mean,
that's,
that would be ideal, I think.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and there's never gonna be a perfect time. We're just gonna have to navigate it as we go and figure it out. We do have the space that Holiday World owns that they allow us to use for parking overflow, so, that's the grass field right next to 162. So, that's an option as well for, if we did happen to have all of this going on at once. I think we could manage.
One thing too, I'm sitting here thinking about the schedule with, the NDOT thing kind of is a little weird, trying to wrap the head around the schedule here a little bit. So call would be this summer, you heard me say, if you were awarded, we would be in construction spring of next year. The other thing too, I think if we look at this as kind of one kind of overall project with a couple of different components to it, I mean, you could potentially do the design, and Nick, you can jump in here whenever, kind of schedule and design. I can see getting design of everything done this summer into late summer, doing bot selections if you wanted to go that route, kind of in the fall time period. Go through those selections, kind of scoping period, fall period, have a contractor on board for everything kind of in the winter months. So you're doing a lot of the work in the winter when there's not as many people at the park. That could work out pretty well for the schedule.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask you that question. If, hypothetically, if we decided today, hey, we're gonna move forward with the playground, what does that look like? When could we start? When could it be completed? Just
Yeah,
to kind of figure that timeline out.
so I'm gonna ask Nick the design component question, so, Nick, let's say,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, well, looking at, hearing what I'm hearing, if you wanted to just do the playgrounds, that's a 3-month design flip from whatever you tell us to go to get you final plans. Now, if you wanted to go after the NDOT funding, then that might change the calculus a little bit in terms of, from a complete design perspective. And looking at, the entirety of the project, in order to do the street parking and do the playground, you really need to do the full design minus the full design of the concession building. And/or the pavilion, at least have an idea of where they're gonna go. But you'd actually forward the roadway design for the parking ahead of time, and maybe the others lag, to make sure you can get the design done to be able to get it into the funding, the grant, source, and then the others may follow a month behind. If you're looking at the full project design, it's probably a 6-month design process at the most. It's a pretty small area. There are, a little bit complicated. You could probably tone that down to 5 months. And then be ready to get yourself, so if for example, we ended up starting the end of April or May, it's gonna take a bit of time to get survey, so you're a month to get survey probably. And then you're probably 3 months for design, and then a little bit of review. And at the end of that, probably 3 weeks, then I think you're in a position to have full plans to get out on the street. Sorry, I know that was a little bit convoluted, so here, let me go back and clarify. So if we're starting, given the go-ahead, and we get out there, say the end of April, get survey, we'll anticipate a month, hopefully it'll be better than that. Begin the design process, but make the street parking the priority part of the design, so that way that piece of the process can get out in time for the NDOT grant stuff, and we could follow that up with the remainder of the design and be complete by the middle of August. And that would be, full design without the concession building design. That would take into account everything else. You'd have the area for the concession and the utilities to the concession, but not the concession, the design of the concession building itself.
And I think that works out well. Typically for the end of the application component, we don't have to have design done for application. We can get quantities put together for the application for that June, July time period. And like I said, September's gonna be kind of that award period. So I think the timing actually lines up really well.
Yeah, especially if we could do the playground during the winter, that would be a huge bonus for everybody.
If we were to receive the street crossing grant, would NDOT need to have their hand at all in the design?
No, they're really not involved in the design. Basically, it's a very simple application. Again, the town's done that in the past. The only difference is this would be a little bit more of a design component. So I think as long as we have that design ready to go once we get an award, because once NDOT awards us, we've got to have that bid in hand 3 months later, so.
What does that look like from our perspective as a town? Because I know Russ usually handles CCMG. Would we have to get him involved, or would Zach work with Midwestern, or how does that
Well,
work from the town perspective?
Zach and Russ.
Okay, so we would need to get
Clint,
Russ involved.
Yeah, they worked on lots of projects together through NDOT, so.
Going into the street.
Yeah, one thing too, just thinking out loud, we want to make sure Russ doesn't have any other projects he's got lined up for community crossings. If he would, worst case scenario, maybe you stick with what Russ has in the queue for this year. I
Zach, do you know, does Russ have anything in planning stages right now?
Only Russ and the good Lord know. I'll have to talk.
Okay. Brian, you be quiet, what do you think?
I'm just taking it all in. I agree with everything that's being said, so.
So I guess, I mean, that's, can you guys get us some estimates on what it would take to design that then?
We absolutely can.
Yep, sure thing.
When would you like that number by?
Is that a problem?
Nick, did you hear that? Tomorrow? Can you make that happen?
Hey, no problem, there's 24 hours between now and then.
You gotta
Absolutely.
keep, you got a keyboard in front of you, just change the numbers real quick.
Exactly.
I mean, I can kind of sketch up what we've talked about tonight maybe, and then give it to you and Nick, and then you can get us some estimates back. I mean,
Yeah, that might be good, just kind of debrief with the group, just make sure we're on the same page and get you the number that you want. I think that would be good, Zach.
Yep.
do you think, next month for the council, before the council meeting?
That's Monday.
Well, I mean, not this, but the next one, the
April.
meeting. Is that reasonable to you guys? That's reasonable?
Yeah,
I think it's definitely doable on our end. That's, yeah, we definitely don't need that much time.
nothing else, we can always have a special meeting too.
Yeah, we're getting quite used to the special meetings.
Okay. Well, that's all I've got, unless somebody else has anything. Very good, well, yeah, Nick, really appreciate your time. Clint, thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the feedback and input and the discussion. It really helps me understand where everybody's at and how we can best serve you.
Thanks, appreciate your time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
You too.
All right, Jane, is there a certain order that we need to do the adjournment, or would you like to discuss further? Or?
No? Anybody have anything else left to say?
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you all for your time,
Yes,
we
thank you.
appreciate it.
Absolutely, very much.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now, adjourn.
Do we have to make a separate motion?
Yep.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting adjourned.
All right, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Good, man.
Appreciate you